This is Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I'm very pleased to have with us today Dan Carella, who's the head of TransUnion's telecommunications and energy vertical. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited that we were able to talk to TransUnion, talk to you, Dan, about some of the really interesting work TransUnion is doing in this field. I think a lot of people know TransUnion as basically a credit reporting agency, but we're about to learn you guys do a lot more, and a lot of the work you're doing is super relevant and super important to the telecommunications industry, and especially in the area of fraud, which we're going to be examining today. But Dan, just to get us up to date, what does TransUnion offer today?
Yeah, so I think Doug, that's a great place to start. So as you had mentioned a few moments ago, I think most people do think of TransUnion as a traditional credit reporting agency. But what I would like folks to know is that we have expanded well beyond that core competency, and have really moved into all sorts of different aspects of business to business connections as well as the business to consumer connection. When I think about TransUnion today, we are really a global insight, information, and analytics company. Folks might not know, certainly the United States is our primary marketplace, but we're actually in 30 countries on 5 different continents. So we are a pretty broad business. We touch every different market segment that's out there and industry that's out there.
So let's dive into the topic of notice. We're going to talk about fraud, and we're going to talk about just how widespread it is amongst consumers, and then we'll start to connect the dots back to how TransUnion is helping both consumers, businesses, organizations, and more deal with this. So Dan, just tell us, is this a widespread problem? Because I think you guys were part of a consumer report that says it is.
Yeah, so we just recently conducted a survey. It's our 2023 Telecommunications Consumer Report. And what we were really interested in learning was hearing directly from consumers as to their thoughts, their concerns, their attitudes on fraud in general, identity protection, another huge area because these two are certainly entwined. And also, we wanted to learn from them what steps they were potentially taking to try and prevent fraudulent activities from occurring. And that's what the survey was about.
And there were three big areas that had surprisingly high numbers, I thought, anyways, in terms of percentage of consumers experiencing fraud attempts multiple times in a week.
Yeah, so right around the results came back, and right around 1/3 of all consumers are recognizing multiple fraud attacks every single week. And these fraud attacks are coming through all different types of what I'll call channels. It could be through voice with spam calls. It could be through SMS and text, and it could be through email. So they're seeing these fraud attacks coming through all of these different channels. I think another sort of interesting stat beyond the third of everybody that sees multiple attacks a week is that over 50% of consumers are seeing fraud attacks on a quarterly basis. So, when you start to extend that window a little bit broader, the numbers go up substantially.
So Dan, sitting where you are with TransUnion and looking at these two verticals, telecommunications and energy, does this sort of start to undermine the viability of telecommunications itself? In other words, if consumers are experiencing this level of fraud attempt, um, does it start to degrade our ability as businesses and organizations to use telecom to communicate?
It's a great question, and I think the short answer is no.
Hmm.
I think that there's certainly a large amount of self accountability, right? So I'll just use myself as an example. I need to be vigilant. I need to be thinking to some degree about malicious attempts to garner my information. But I also recognize as a consumer that I can't do it myself. And I think one of the results of the survey as well is that consumers are looking for help to mitigate some of these attacks that are occurring to them. And they're really looking through 4 different, I'll call them avenues. One are the carriers themselves, and that is to help prevent some of the SMS and texting type fraudulent campaigns that are against them. They're also looking at tech companies. And by tech companies, I'm specifically referring to companies that own a browser or own email exchanges. Again, because of some attacks that the phishing campaigns that come through that channel. I think there are also consumers are looking at ISPs as a way to help them, and certainly looking at device OEMs as well. And there's some crossover, of course, right? So nowadays there's a lot of crossover between the wireless carriers and ISPs, for example. Topic for another day, interesting topic. There's certainly a lot of connection there. And I think all of these areas of help then tie directly, Doug, to what you were talking about, which is what consumers are looking for to help try and prevent them, which is products and solutions that these companies can offer to them.
So Dan, in the survey we're discussing, you know, based on demographics, based on a number of different things, age, income, different things, people looked at this differently. But one thing almost everyone agreed to at some level was that they were looking to the telecom industry, the carriers, and so on, as maybe offering some resources to mitigate this issue.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Doug. And what I would say is that although the results tended to skew toward the carrier side, I think there was, from the consumer perspective now, I think there was some shared areas of interest for them in terms of where they need that help. So the carriers, and the line in the sand that I'll draw is about a year. So if somebody is a consumer is new to a particular carrier, they tend to think around 37% or so of the folks that we surveyed believe that the carrier has primary responsibility in terms of helping them prevent fraudulent activities. If you then extend it out over a decade, that tends to grow, right? So over time, people become more reliant on the carrier, their wireless provider, to help them with some of the solutions here. If you then start to look at the other three areas, in addition to carrier being a tech provider, an ISP, and an OEM, what's interesting is that consumers also look at OEMs, much lower percentage, but over time, they look at the original equipment manufacturer as being a primary, I'll say, partner to them in, again, preventing fraudulent activities. If you look at the tech side, which is the email providers, that decreases over time from the consumer perspective. They don't look at those types of companies as being truly helpful in solving this problem for them. I'm not saying they are or aren't. It's just some of the feedback we received. And then if you look at the ISP side, it basically remains pretty flat. So, whether it's 1 year or 10 year, roughly 20% of folks look toward the ISP as being their primary source of fraud prevention.
So Dan, with that in mind, let's come back to TransUnion. What do you guys offer our community in terms of maybe products and services they can use or in fact actually resell?
Yeah, so the way that our business model works, particularly within my telecom world here, is we have a suite of different products and solutions. We have what we call the TruValidate platform, which encompasses all of our fraud prevention solutions. That platform itself is delivered via an API, so it's very easy integration, and it has a series of different point solutions incorporated into that platform. We have 6 other solutions as well, depending upon the functional area of responsibility at any one of our customer bases, right? So we've got Tru Audience, which is a marketing-based solution. We've got TruContact, which is our communication-based solutions. So if you are sitting within a contact center and you want to make sure that all of your outbound calls, for example, are branded with your name, or the name, if you're a third-party contact center, or the name of the company that you're working with, to try and increase call yield, increase answer rates, we have these types of solutions that allow you to put your brand on all of those types of calls. So we really run the entire gamut. And what I didn't mention, which is also really interesting, going back to the survey, is we offer a suite of identity protection solutions as well. So if you're an HR buyer, we can sell products to you to sell to give to your employees, but you can also repackage some of those solutions and sell them to the consumers.
So it sounds like there's also a little bit of white labeling opportunities here.
There is absolutely, particularly in the consumer side. So, Identity Force is our identity protection product, and that solution specifically has both a sell to and a sell through model associated with it. So, yeah, no, that's it's when I think about the telcos in general. One of the things that I've noticed is they need to continually innovate, of course, but they also need to create differentiated products. And having an identity type product to help sell to their customers or give to their customers, if that's the business model that they want to employ, is a differentiator. Because it is something that can help prevent fraud, and it is an area that consumers are now gravitating towards.
And is it also the case that with TransUnion's brand representing protection, is it also possible for a company to actually, in fact, say, hey, this is a service provided back by TransUnion that we're offering?
Yeah, and we actually do that today. I'm not going to name the specific carrier, but there is a major carrier that we work with, and they take our identity protection solution and they commercialize it on a white label basis to their customers. They also offer it on a non-commercialized, a non-white label basis to their own employees as well.
So you can go both ways. So it looks
You can
like
go
there's a
both
lot of
ways.
opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely, which makes it exciting, right?
Well, Dan, I really want to thank you for joining me today on this brief podcast on this really important issue, and very importantly, to learn more about what TransUnion is doing in the telecom field, field, telecom fraud mitigation, and I think, frankly, some of the opportunities for many of our readers and listeners to maybe work with your company more closely. Where can we learn more about these resources?
Well, thank you, Doug, first off for having me on the podcast. I've really enjoyed myself and certainly look forward to follow up conversations with you. To directly answer your question, best place to go would be transunion.com. When you're on the website, there's a business to business section, and you will find plenty of information about our various solutions. And you will also find plenty of information about all of the industries and sectors that we cater to, whether it's the telecommunications space, the energy space, or financial services and insurance, for example.
Well, Dan, I am looking forward to our next podcast. I know we're going to be doing more, but for now, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you again.